Well, hi everybody, Father Alex here. Welcome to another episode of the Godcast. This is a special Godcast this week. It's around working class and particularly around vocations within the Church of England, whether it's ordained or into a lay position. Just asking the question and some of the challenges about what the church might want to consider as we look forward to the future. If you enjoy this podcast, then please do share it with others. And if you'd like to see any more, there's loads of interviews from the religious sector, but also from celebrity music, authors, writers, all sorts of different people. So do check out the Godcast. And if you'd like to explore further, you can find my book on Amazon and in Waterstones. It's called Our Daily Bread from Argos to the Altar, a free story. But for now, I do enjoy this interview on working class vocations in the Church of England. And here we are. Here it comes now. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Godcast special, which is featuring and really thinking about vocations from the working classes. I've got some fabulous guests on. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves to you. Susie, let's start with you. Tell us where you are and where you're from.
So my name is Susie. I live in the southwest. I'm in Taunton. I grew up in Bristol, and I'm vicar of a church in what's known in this area as Magnificat Parish in Bridgewater.
Lee, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Lee, and I'm an ordinand. I'm in training for priestly ministry at the minute. I'm from Liverpool, but I'm living in North Yorkshire, and I'm on a contextual pathway with St Hill College.
Okay. Chris, hi, good morning.
Good morning. I'm Chris, and I am the rector of Morecambe Parish Church in Morecambe.
And last but no means least, Michelle.
I'm Michelle Delves, Rev Mich Delves, and I'm an associate mission priest in a beautiful market town called Corn across St Bartholomew's and Holy Trinity Church.
Yeah. And if anybody's watching the first time, my name's Alex. I'm the vicar of St Matthew's Church in Burnley. So let's get down to business on this. I was reading recently quite an old UK Gov poll that said that 62% of the church comes from the middle classes. Now, I've invited you all because you may describe as middle class, but I'm guessing probably more leaning towards working class. And just if we can start, just tell us a bit about the impact of that and how that kind of showed itself when you were preparing for training, when you were perhaps going through the process. Lee, could we start with you? How was the selection process for you?
I mean, the selection process when I was going through it with the diocese, which is Diocese of Leeds, was quite inclusive, and I enjoyed the process. However, there were certain times when you'd be meeting with someone who was either like a retired priest or someone who interviewing you who's going to feed back to the diocese on that. And I remember being interviewed by a retired priest, and he asked me who my favourite artist was, and I just answered that Eminem, and he just looked at me like like what? And he said no, like like a painter or I was like, I don't know, and I was just being honest with him.
It's such a classic example, isn't it? I mean, to many people in the working classes, I think something like Eminem is a significant figure. He's a very significant person in culture, society. But to ask that question is indicative and a great way to start. Suze, what about yourself? What kind of experiences and challenges have you faced over the years?
So selection process wise, I think my experience was quite inclusive. I think the main thing is I was a single parent at the time with 3 little kids, and that was kind of more of a hindrance, I think, than thinking about my working class background, because I think actually I've adapted myself because of coming to faith kind of as a teenager. I'd sort of, in my experience of church life, kind of learned to adapt to a different culture, and even my accent change. I used to have a really strong Bristolian accent, and I deliberately remember the day that I decided to change my accent and speak in it, kind of change the way that I spoke, so that people would kind of take me a bit more seriously, because with this really rich, which I think now is so wonderful, the Bristolian accent, but actually I found that people didn't take me seriously enough. So I deliberately adjusted that and other things really to kind of fit in with the church culture, and kind of almost it was kind of like, I don't know, not turn my back on my working class culture, but certainly felt like I had to adapt into something new to really fully be just a kind of understood and accepted, really.
Yeah, thanks, Susie. Michelle, when I first went to see a director of Ordinand, you know, one of the first questions I remember was like, "What are you reading?" And just prior to this interview, chatting, we were teasing Susie because she's got a wonderful collection of books, and I think it's important to say, working class people read books. That is absolutely 100%. But I do remember being asked that question, and I think my response was I was reading The Secret Diaries of Adrian Mole, and you know, I think that wasn't the answer that was required. Michelle, tell us about your experience of sitting down before a DDO, or you know, the challenges that you found.
I think it's similar to Susan Lee, really. I actually loved the DDO process. I had a really supportive Charlie Anna, a wonderful DDO. And the whole back process was a joy to me. Everybody was so stressed at getting it perfect, but I'd really felt God say early on, this is just a conversation, so don't get stressed, girl. Just go in there and be yourself. So I suppose that helped. So the 3-day back to me was like a 3-day residential where I got fed, really. And as a single mum, what a joy. So I loved that whole process of it, of the discerning process. I did come across things like that, like, you know, somebody asked me what I read, and I loved Tozer and loads of theologians. And I could tell they were really surprised. You know, I almost felt like saying, we can actually read, you know. Yeah, so there was an othering even then, although the people were wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, and Chris, I mean, you know, and I'm really glad, Michelle, that you said your back process was wonderful. Mine was just I've had the misfortune of doing it twice, you know, and the first one was pretty catastrophic, really, you know, and you know, I think I felt as soon as I put my knife in the wrong place, you know, it was a downward trajectory from there. Chris, how did you find that process?
Well, I found the diocese stuff, the DDO stuff, all right. Although we had a lovely guy at the time who was the DDO. We were invited to his house. I didn't know where that was, in the back of somewhere, and summoned into his study, which was lined with, books. And he sat on a very sort of grand sort of computer chair, and I sat in an IKEA Poang. Which was obviously giving a little bit, and so it felt very much like I was sort of, and he was sort of. But I remember being at the time just amazed that one person could have so many books that had nothing to do with what I had books about at the time. Now, I'd got a few what I considered to be theology books, but they were. Turns out later on, I discovered that they were sort of written by other ministers and not proper theology, like his wall was plastered with. But then I got to, that was fine. I got to Shallowford House, which is the place where we went to, and I had to sort of live for a weekend in this place. And I arrived slightly late. Don't know, it's not unusual for me, of course, but I arrived slightly late and was ushered into a seat and filled in the form and everything. And I was in my shorts and t-shirt, and there was very much like, where are your chinos and shirt? You know, where's your lounge wear? But eating a meal felt weird because we were being observed, and you're sitting and there are knives and forks and there are peas, and it's like the peas are the test. Do you serve the people around you with the peas? Do you eat the peas? Do you scoop them up and shovel them in? Do you spike them? How do you do it? And it was quite an anxious. I remember the meal times being the most anxious because it was clear that we were being observed, and were we conversational while we ate. But then the thought of flicking a pea across the table at some guy in a collar was worried me. It was quite a, but there are some people who are really at ease, glass of sherry in one hand and it just, different story, isn't
it? Did any of you have any of you experienced kind of this, what I think they call it, imposter syndrome? that I shouldn't really be here. Susie, you're
Absolutely.
nodding
That
your
was
head.
brilliant.
Michelle, just tell us, and Lee, if you just want to have a think, come to you in a minute.
I remember actually having got through the selection process and then looking at colleges. The college I actually went to was Ripon College in Cuddesdon, but I remember the day of going there to look around. I turned up and they were playing croquet on the lawn and drinking Pimm's, and I was just like, I won't even say what I actually said, but I literally, I felt this is such an alien, like it felt such an alien world to me, and I'm like, this is just something that I've never done. Like, you know, we used to play football or like, you know, rugby, or kind of just like nothing that I'd seen before. And I just thought these people are really not like my usual kind of people. Actually, the experience of going to college turned out to be all right, and I really, really appreciated it. And actually the high culture, I guess, of which I think was largely my experience at Cuddesdon, it helped me to have a bit better understanding of sort of some certain areas of the church that I'd not understood before, and people as well. But I think I'm not always sure that works the other way around, and that I think is the problem.
Yeah. Michelle?
I think with me, I went to Cranmer Hall,
Woo.
and I mean, the community was wonderful. That journey in itself was a trauma, but anyway, that's another story. But I think I experienced, I'd only been there about 3 weeks, and I remember I took Trini to school, and I was stood just at near a wall, and I was smoking a rollie, and one of the people I'd only met twice came up and asked me if they could pray for me, and usually I'm a prayer junkie. I'll take all prayers, but they felt something almost patronizing in it. And it was really weird. From that day forward, I started to feel less and less. And I remember about 10 days later, just turning up at Kate Bruce, she was a preaching professor, at her office, just like snot and tears. It's like, I have got to get out here. I do not belong here. I've never felt as poor. I've never felt as black. I cannot, cope with this. And Kate was brilliant. She was really down to earth. And she had this black Labrador and it started barking at me. And she said, we can't swear on here, can we?
So what you say is,
Well,
it is, Michelle.
what she said is, shut up, Indy, you racist twat. And there was a real truth in her. And so I found an ally, I suppose, in Kate, who reminded me constantly, like, because for me, I was really excited. I was just ready to go where God was calling me. But the thing that happened, which made me feel like an imposter syndrome, was all my peers were asked certain questions, like, where's God calling you? What do you think about theology? And I was never asked these questions. In fact, when I tried to answer, I would see people looking uncomfortably past me quickly. And so, that's where the imposter, I think everybody suffers it. But I think when everybody starts to act as though you're not actually there, it solidifies that, and it's really damaging. So that started really early on for me.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Lee, I reckons, I might be wrong, but I think people, I started with you because you've got Michelle's Leeds accent's pretty strong, but you've got a very defined Scots accent. And I guarantee there will be people watching this going, look at him, bald head, beard, Scouse. What's going on?
Tattooed hands and everything.
Hey.
Tattooed hands, all that. So
some will have turned off now.
yeah, that's like, oh yeah, what's he do? He's not, heathen and all that. But
yeah.
Lee, what have you had some monkeys on your back to shake off, or just tell us?
Yeah, mine were more like personal ones though, because the training that I'm doing is full-time contextual. So I go to college once a week. I do all my training in the parish, close to where I'm living. But I remember visiting other colleges, and when they ask you to engage with the other students, and they were like, oh, should we play some games? And to me, I was thinking, they had wine and that on the table, and to me, I was like, I'm gonna have some drinking games now, or like something like that. And they were playing like intellectual type games, and I'm like, well, I don't even know how to spell words that to play Scrabble with. And like people were asking me, like what books I've read, and I was quite proud at this point of saying, do you know what, until I was 29, I couldn't read. I wasn't illiterate, but I had no fluency in reading at all until when I was in the military, they sent me to an educational advisor, and they showed me how to learn and how to read. And then I went and redid my GCSEs, and when I was 31, I got an A, which was made up with. But yeah, you have these things, and there's conversations you have, and you think that you're on the same wavelength as someone for a moment, and then you just completely lose them because they haven't had those experiences. I remember like people talking about when they were kids, and I went to have a nightmare in it when you didn't have any milk in the house and you had to put water on your cereal, and they were like, "What? You can't do that." And I was like, "Oh, I did. I didn't particularly like it. I'd rather eat it dry." But they just hadn't had those, like those lived experiences.
Yeah. And do you still see it now, Lee, when you tell people that you're training for ministry, do you ever get what you?
Yeah. But it's more conversations that I'm having, just in every day. Because I use a wheelchair part-time as well. And people are shocked that I'm even working at all. And I was like, working classes, like we got a strong work ethic anyway. I said, but no, I said I'm being supported through ministry, and they're like, what? And they see the tattoos and the accents, and like I probably look like a bit of a convict, and they can't believe it. But then after they've spoken to me for a few minutes, that I normally get the answer back. Yeah, no, I can absolutely see that. There are a few people that don't um that don't engage with me, and I've had that in some churches, but that's in like congregations, and not like church hierarchy.
No. And I've got loads of questions now in my head, but can I just ask about that when we're in training, Chris? You and I have chatted previously. That the social element of college was fabulous, but the other bits were horrendous. I also want to ask questions about family as well. The impact of, maybe I couldn't afford to train full time. I had a pretty good job at Argos. I was earning decent money. I couldn't afford for my wife just to stop working with 3 growing kids. So it was the part-time pathway. Chris, we could start with you about what it was that made you uncomfortable about that training period. And Michelle, you're a mum, aren't you? Just about maybe some of the challenges. Suze, I'm not sure what, but obviously, of course, contribute. The challenges during that process. Chris.
Well, I was at a different stage than I am now, and I have got the royal flush in life. I'm male, white, and I can talk the talk when put on the spot, and I have a voice that people just automatically listen to, and I was acutely aware of that, and so my arriving at college was actually, people expected that this is Chris. We know what Chris is going to be like. We know what to expect, and one of the boys. I never really fit that. It just jarred with me, and I found it quite uncomfortable because you try and play along for a bit because you're like, right, this is college. This is what I got to do. Got to fit in. Don't rock the boat. But the culture of the whole thing I found difficult. But I had a similar experience. Kate Bruce was my tutor as well, Michelle, and I clammed up at the beginning, and so Kate would say, "How are you, Chris?" And I'd say, "Yeah, fine," because that's what I grew up saying. Yeah, fine. Yeah, fine, absolutely fine. Yeah, we just crack on here. And in the end, she opened the door to her office and said, "You can get out now, Chris." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, listen, mate, if you're going to find me again, I got better things to do with my time. I want to talk to you about how you are. And if you're not going to tell me, I'm not interested." And I was like, "Oh, okay, right." So, and I opened up a bit about the challenges I was facing. And she was great. But it's the culture, it's the fishbowl nature of it.
Yeah.
Everybody thrown in together. and it's in a college setting. It's really formative, to use that word they love so much. It is formative. You do become shaped by that, but it's really uncomfortable to discover that a large part of who you are isn't the mainstream. And therefore, because it isn't the mainstream, it isn't really the thing we do here, you know. And sometimes you get people who are very nice, but just like Michelle said, there is a slight patronizing edge to it, you know. Oh, you know, you might be, you know, slightly more sweary, or you know, whatever it is, that there's always something. There's that sense that it's not really what we do here. That well done, but not a bit less of that, please. A bit less of you, and trying to work out what bit of it is me and what bit of it is the things that need rounding off in the hands of the potter. You know, God is kind of shaping us all, isn't he? And what bits need shaping and what bits actually, no, this is me, and I'm sticking to this. And I find that really quite, you know.
Yeah, I think I want to come back to that idea of being patronized. I've definitely felt patronized on numerous occasions. Michelle, you know, I can't help thinking about, how do you do the school run when you've got college? How do you do this? How do you do that? Tell us.
I mean, I was lucky. There were some beautiful people at Cranmer. The people, some of the peers who I still, you know, I've still friends with some of them now. My problem was with the establishment, the hierarchy itself. It felt toxic. I felt poisoned the whole time I was there. And this process, this angered me more than anything. At the end of it, I was left in a state. And so the diocese paid for counselling, and the counsellor was a wonderful man. And he was the person who told me all about the process of invisibilization, which is a well-known phenomena within the formational training. And so that's what happens. And when he said it, I just broke down, because all I can explain is there is an elitism, and it suffocates anything that's, you know, authentic, or, you know, like I have always prayed. I was raised by a beautiful Christian woman. She was teaching me about discerning the Holy Spirit and the joy of the Lord when I was 3.5 years old. And I thank God for that, because that formational journey was not a formational journey for me. It was a destructive, violent, aggressive, and oppressive journey, which left scars. I mean, I'm loving being a priest, but I'm only just healing, and I'm 7 years in now. And it was that elitist assumption that if you're poor, you're just a little bit retarded. So the learning, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about the learning. Don't worry, because you're just not academic. When actually the truth was, my strongest reference was my academic reference. So that's the difficulty. It's getting all these labels put on you.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time trying to get to know people, professors. And what I was shocked at is, for somebody who was in an environment, when I go into an environment, which is my environment, and a stranger comes in, I'm so engrossed. It's like, I want to know, who are you? What are you doing? You know, what makes you tick? And so I did a lot of that, but there was very little reciprocal. And so, you know, I remember once speaking to my tutor about, you know, I said, I wish everybody had stopped saying that, because I got into trouble because I left lectures on several occasions because I got so angry about the way they spoke about the poor. It was literally like we were a little bit retarded. And so I had to go see my tutor, and she was really angry, and she said, was it, you know, I was being judgmental. I said, no, I'm not. I am using my discernment, and that's what I see, Joss. You know, I read a Bible where poor people have just the same amount of power as anybody else, because Jesus is the equalizer. And yet I come to a college where poor people are spoken about again and again as though we're retarded. We're not retarded. We just haven't had the opportunities, and we haven't had the opportunities because of this toxic thing that we've built into this system, and many others, that it's a soil that only supports one category of people. And so I kept saying to Josh, stop trying to change me. You've been trying to change the flowers for decades, and you're breaking people. Change the soil.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was. It was really difficult, because for a while I knew exactly what was going on. And there's a phrase, and I have not heard it for a long time, thank God, but it was used widely at Cranmer, and it was, just play the game.
Yeah.
Now, I traveled 290 miles with my daughter as a single mum, not to play games, to be obedient to God.
Yeah.
And so every time, you know, they asked me what I'd come to Cranmer for, God sent me with some questions. And it was, where are all the poor people? Where are all the black people? You know, they were questions that I wanted to look at theologically, but they were never taken seriously, because I was seen as the kind of semi-historical, semi-retarded, poor black working class.
It's really important, Michelle. It's really important, Michelle. The church hears this, you know,
Yeah.
because it's
Oh, I wrote to the archbishops, both archbishops, my bishop,
Yeah.
you know, and I got responses. But my worry is that we talk the talk really well, but I don't see a lot of walking the walk.
no.
And so even now we speak about, oh, the poor and how we've got to be better with the poor, and people are sorry about how the poor is being treated. And I'm sorry I do that, but it's a nudge voice I use. But you know what I mean? We hear a lot of talk, and yet I'm still mentoring working class people through their formational training, and it is nearly destroying them.
Yeah. I think it's important because you know, I've learned through my role on synod that with all the best will in the world, the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Archbishop of York cannot change the church on their own. And just think, picking up on your experience, you know, in my experience, I'll come to you in a minute, Susie, is that, you know, I felt when I was going through the process, I had to prove that I was clever enough, not that I'd been called by God. You know, and I was being judged on my academic ability, and so when and you talk about the nightmare of the poison toxin and that carried right through my ministerial training, because when you know, I was getting in my essays, I was scraping home, I was just about getting the 40 mark, and to me, everyone, that was success. But to everybody else, it was like, you know, and some of these people were saying, oh, what did you get? And I didn't want to tell them what I got, because I knew that 40 to them was crap. Oh, I got 82 on my you know, doctrine. And in the end, I just said, can we just not share each other's results? Because it's making me feel really bad. You know, it's bad enough, and you're just making it worse. Susie, what's your thoughts? You've listened to us all there for a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I found, because I was a single parent as well with 3 kids, residential in college, and I couldn't have an office to study somewhere else in the college because I was looking after them. So like all of my essay writing was in the chaos of like what my own upbringing was in quite a little small council house or flat, and then like just madness going on around. So in my house, it was me and my dog, my cats, my 3 kids, and like loads of other people's kids that would just be in the flat the whole time running around whilst I'm sat there trying to, like, with headphones in, trying to write an essay, and other people were having a really lovely time around the college, kind of in their own little perfected little offices that they could kind of get on and do stuff. And so it was hard work, but I think maybe it was pride, maybe it was, I always had this thing that I just didn't want people to look and feel sorry for me, because I think that was my experience, that people would feel like they needed to give you, like, I hear a lot of people saying about, and particularly thinking about the poor, that like giving people a hand up, almost like trying to bring people up to a better level. And it's like, well, actually my culture and who I am, I'm as fine as me, and actually that's how we should be accepted and accepting people. And everybody's story is so important, and there's so much that we got to learn from each other, but it felt like I think like you have to fit into a different environment. So I didn't really ever sort of put my hand up and go, hang on a minute, I am struggling a bit to find time, or I'm struggling a bit to kind of find space because I'm trying to manage all this, because I didn't want to appear like, because I found the academic stuff a bit difficult. Like, you know, I'd never done a degree before. I'd not written an essay. And so even like being thrown into that environment where you're suddenly just given, all right, go and write an essay at the end of, you're like, I don't know how to even do that. And I think we had one class on how to put, you know, kind of construct an essay. And I just remember feeling like, oh my word, like this just feels too much. And so I think when I then started, you know, did an essay and it passed, it was like, oh, actually, I think I can do this, but yet always feeling not as good as everybody else, which is quite a hard thing. You know, you just don't ever believe that you're capable of stuff, and that sort of, even now, like that kind of imposter syndrome, you kind of I still feel that, you know, like there's days where I look at some of my clergy colleagues and I think I don't sometimes have the language to use, because actually I use a different language, and I don't have all the posh words to use, and I don't have like the kind of sometimes the conversational things that I hear going on around, but actually I can relate to people that I know that some of them probably can't relate to because of my experience and upbringing, which I really, really value and appreciate. And you know, my stepdad was like, he was tattooed up, used to be down the pub every week. We'd be like, you know, our upbringing was chaotic. We had like, his sisters were into prostitution and kind of like it was mad. So like the environment now that I live in, and even with my own kids, it's like completely different to my own experience as well.
Yeah, yeah. And Lee, your tattoos are visible. I have a number of tattoos, but you know what? I was embarrassed. I didn't. I don't think I got them out before I was ordained. I kind of hid them away, and only my closest friends, Chris, would know about them. You know, and it's like, and you're there, Lee. You've got them on your hands. They're inescapable. I wonder, particularly, Lee. I'd like to ask you this question: Is do you think you are perhaps the token working class Scouser in the church? You know, do you think the church yearns for 20 Lee Finnegans, half a dozen Michelles, a few Chris Krawiec, that's more than enough, a couple of half a dozen Suze Osmonds. Do you think we're almost being patronized in the selection process? Lee, what do you think?
So my experiences are completely different. So only based on I went through the new process, and the diocese and Bishop Helen, who was my area bishop at the time, put quite a lot of thought in where to place me, and what training would be best suited for me and my family. I've got a difficult family dynamic, two special needs sons, and I've got a daughter as well, and I'm disabled, and my wife is main carer for everyone. So I don't think anyone else would have had any less consideration. But I've had, like quite a lot of prayer and thought gone into how they were gonna help me through. And I think the church does need, like people, like us people who like not afraid to talk about the difficult things, not afraid to speak up, not afraid to, like really minister, like get to the heart of what's going on. But I'd just like to see the church get to a stage where we're not thinking we need to get 50 more working class people in. We need to employ more black people. We need to like to see the church just get to a stage where we're just, like we're that diverse that we don't have to cover any other bases.
Yeah. Well, and Shell, what do you think? Because Lee, I know Bishop Helen very well, and I hold her in the highest regard. Do you think it's geographical centric? Do you think it depends which diocese you fall into, or what's your thoughts?
I would say massively. I mean, my training diocese was. You see, I think this is one of the complications as well, because the people, as per individuals, are nice, and so this oppression is spoken very politely. Nobody's calling me nigger in the corridors and things like that. Do you understand? So that's a difficulty. But Durham was really difficult because and this was proved because after my first year of study, so I'm dyspraxic, and dyspraxia has never been an issue to me. I've had I've always been highly functioning. I worked in refuges, management, worked with the police, never been a problem, never even thought about it. I'd go in, get a strategy up, carry on. Unfortunately, because I went in through the diocese, I slipped through the net. And so they left me without any support. The first time I'd done academic training in 13 years without any support for dyspraxia. That has a massive impact upon you. Now, I always knew, and I kept saying, I knew that was because I was just the token. So they could easily say, oh, you're just not academic. Don't worry too much. We'll get it in place soon. Now, after about 14 months of this, the support was in place. And we had the ministry division come to Cranmer to ask us how our training pathways had been. And so we were all in the chapel. And so I spoke a bit about mine, which was atrocious. I mean, I was threatened with homelessness. I developed serious illness. It was just horrific. I won't go into that. God was in it all. But I'm expressing this to the ministry division. And then after I'd spoken, another guy who I trained with, it was very upper middle class white, literally said, I really can't understand what Michelle's saying because I have dyspraxia and they've been wonderful with me. And I literally at that point said, I rest my case, because there was a difference in treatment all the way along. And so the impact of unsupported dyspraxia had a massive, I love learning. I still have not got over, when I went in there, the plan was I was going to do a 2-year diploma and then get out and finish my degree. But they messed up my training pathway. so much that I was never able to complete my degree. Now, to them, that's been brushed off, but that's still something that I feel deeply wounded about. I'm 57, you know, but that was all because of this just being token. So their expectations are low of you, and I think I was a problem for them because I am a gobby northerner, literally. And so I was constantly calling them out. I was constantly asking, why is academia on a pedestal? Why are you overcomplicating God's word and how we speak about it so much that his own people didn't even discuss it anymore?
Yeah.
So I was asking those questions, and it peed them off.
Yeah.
But ultimately, a lot of it came down to the fact that I was poor. If I'd have been better off, a little bit more elite, despite everything would have been supported. But because I was poor, they could hang it all. Oh, she's just poor.
I did read an interesting statistic recently where it suggested that 81% of people ordained have degrees, which is high. I'm interested, Chris, to ask you about, Lee's doing the, let's call it the apprenticeship. On a personal level, I want to see this as an option, not being assessed and then told, you know what you're good at. Like Michelle said, I love learning, but I don't learn by sitting and listening to somebody talk at me for 60 minutes. I learn by the experience. I learn by the interaction and the engagement. That's just how I am. That was never considered. It was never part of my results. And if it was, I'd like to think I might have got a first and not a pass, but that's just the way the system is. Chris, what do you think about the training pathways? Do you think it needs to change radically?
Well, it is changing slowly, but I just want to pick up on something Michelle said. And the problem that I think that the church has, like a lot of institutions, is that listening isn't always genuine. Or if it's genuine with the people who are doing the listening, it then doesn't translate quickly or well into action. Sometimes, we've all got stories, and I think the working class have some of the most terrific stories of transformation in Christ, some of the most amazing stories of how Jesus is alive and how he's sort of sweeping through people's lives and bringing just this wonderful transformation. But it doesn't make people into middle class people. It makes people into followers and lovers of Jesus Christ, and that's how they're transformed. And I think institutions love a poster child. They love someone with tattoos and red hair they can stick on the training manual. Look, this is for you. We're good. We're doing it. Your Insta photographs. They love that, but they've not quite yet understood the real listening thing. I think this is the problem. Like, if you say to somebody, what's your experience like? You better be prepared to listen. And I think about Desmond Tutu, an epic example of Christian person, and apartheid and all of that. And how was any change brought? I remember him saying, I listened to him speak about it. He said it was just about listening, like properly listening, doing the initial listening, and then coming back and having another go and having a proper listen and saying, your story has meaning. Let's not talk over it, put another story in, or try and correct it immediately. Like what you've said to me, oh, that sounds horrible. Let me tell you where you're wrong, or let me tell you where your experience is just a small one and everyone else is having a great time. That's not listening. That's correcting. That's editing. That's changing. And I think that's where the institution of the Church of England needs to get better. It needs to get much better at properly listening. Like, what is your experience? Oh, right. Well, I don't know what to do about that, but I've really heard it and it's bugging me. Like it's eating at me because I'm a genuine follower of Jesus, and your experience is ow, that hurts. That's where change comes from.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of work to do. I think there's an awful lot of work to do. I think more working class need to be in more senior roles, to have a voice, to not tell people others what to do, but be an influence, be an advocate, be a wise voice. And of course, Susie, this is gospel led, isn't it? Jesus didn't go and pick the CEO of Sainsbury's off the shelf, did he? Or the guy from Harrow High School, private school. He went to the shore and picked the fishermen.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I I kind of, when I'm thinking about the gospel, I always think if it's not good news for the poor, then that's not the gospel. It's not good news. And so you kind of got to go from that place of thinking Jesus spent his life on the margins, and that's the people that he was hanging out with, and those are the people that he chose as to be the disciples. And it wasn't like the elite and the academic, but actually they were the ones that were the people that he kind of went, actually, these are the messengers to the world, and this is how the world is going to be transformed by this group of people. And it's the opposite to what the world says. And it's sad that the church doesn't represent that, because it's kind of, you look at Jesus and then look at Christianity sometimes, and there's such a big disparity between actually the person of Christ and all that Jesus was and lived for, and then what you see the church getting up to in this kind of elite culture and what people think. I mean, even like yesterday, somebody came into the church, a funeral I'm taking next week, and this woman said, oh, my granddaughter's going to say something, and she's a bit worried because she's going to talk about a sex worker, because she said her granddad once dressed up as a sex worker and it was really funny for the family. And she's like, but don't worry, she's going to turn around and she said to me, she's going to go, oh, sorry, Vicar, for saying that. And I'm like, what is it that people expect of us? Like, they expect that there's, that clergy or like the church is just kind of sort of some stuck up culture that doesn't understand real life or what's going on amongst normal people, or kind of, in those places where the margins are. So I think there's so much that needs to be challenged and changed and kind of represented so differently. And it really does have to change. Otherwise, I think the church, well, certainly it's dying, it will die out, and it needs a massive challenge.
Yeah.
Actually go, let's represent not just that, 81% you said of people that have got a degree, and that kind of I think within the country statistics, I think it's about 4% of people that have got a degree. Within the church, it's kind of in the 80s. And it's not saying that working class people shouldn't be educated or can't get educated and all that, but it's just not representative of the voice of all people, and actually the majority voice that Jesus listened to, which is like, how does this affect the poorest and those on the margins and those that kind of others consider least?
Yeah, it's really important. Go on, Shell.
No, I was just going to say really quickly, I think the thing that we forget as well is that when we look back on revival, it always starts on the edge. It doesn't start in the middle of a big posh performance fest. It starts on the edge. And the other thing is that, I think the church recreated in our image is dying. It is disappearing before our very eyes. But I think what we often can forget is that the church is not God's plan A, it's God's plan. And so, God's church, the church led truly by Jesus Christ, being the leveler, will continue to grow and to prosper. I think the disheartening thing is when you're in the middle of it, you lose sight that there is two things going on. And so it just feels like a death. What we forget is that God, it's almost like he's taken over again in some ways, and he's shaking the church. He's refusing to have the poor patronized any longer. And, like Durham now is different. It has changed because, I went on Panorama. I had to really stand. But what really upset me was afterwards, I had so many calls from people going, oh, well done, and blah, blah, blah. People who were in much better, more powerful positions than me, who could have stood years before I did. And so I think that's the thing. It's about the poor, working class. It's not losing our voice. Because as I said to, I love Blackburn. I'm having a whole different experience here. But, as I was saying then, it's like ultimately you cannot bring wounded soldiers into an army, right? And then continue to, we need much more pastoral care for poor people, because they bring things to the party, super sharp discernment and absolute unashamedness of Jesus Christ and all he's doing in their life. And so there is a real power that comes with the working class. It's not like we're inviting, come on, we'll get you. There's a power that comes with us. But for that power to be fully enabled and empowered, we have to get on God's plan. We have to put pastoral care, that heart of the church, back in the center with Jesus, because we use the word corporate far too much, so much that we become like a corporate body rather than the body of Christ first and foremost.
Yeah, I think that's really profound, Michelle. I think that's really profound because, I sit on General Synod and it's not very pleasant. It's not those things that you talk about. I think it starts, I think what you said, I think God's in this, and I think God is speaking to this particular church at this time saying, what you're doing is not working. And if you carry to do what's not working, you will die a slow death, and we will all become ministers of palliative care in the church that we all love and represent. And I do think that God is saying to us, there's an opportunity here to try something different, and if you try something different, you might have a new outcome. And that outcome is about about building relationships. Never mind with, absolutely, Michelle, what you say about building relationships with the poor and pastoral care. But we have to learn how to be kind and considerate to one another. In our discussions about LLF, in our discussions about class, about academia, so many times at Synod, I've listened to people speak, and I think you are speaking as yourself. You are not speaking from a place of Jesus Christ, because if you were, you would not be saying what you do and what you say, and you would not be, and so I think we have to really be serious about this. And I want to see bishops talking about this. I'm not bothered. I've got no career aspirations. I want people from the top talking about this, speaking why we need more working class people, what they will bring to our church, how they will change our church, how they will mold our church and make us fitter and better for the future. It's so important. Anyway, that turned into a rant. I didn't
Just
mean
quickly
to
as
do
well,
that.
one last thing, and I will shut up. The other thing we need to remember, right, is we need to repent of how we've treated the poor. The church was never meant to be a middle upper class old boys club that educated the already educated and looked after the children of their children. It was meant to be shared. And so we need to repent of how we've othered the poor as well. Because I hear a lot of it spoken, but I don't see a lot of that. So there's lots of poor people being invited into leadership now, and that is wonderful. I was late today because I've been running Empower. But my worry is they're coming in to do exactly the same ministry as us, but they're getting paid nothing or very little. So I don't think that's true repentance. That's not equaling up. That's, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I love Empower.
Yeah,
but we need to keep our eye on that.
A friend of mine is a guy called Luke Lorna, and he's appalled by the amount of money that's swilling around, and it's just not coming to the right places. And that is a cause of repentance in itself. We've kind of we've come to the end of the time. Lee, I just want you to tell us. So let's finish with some positives. Let's tell us about your training experience. It seems like you're enjoying it. When are you ordained, Lee?
Hopefully be ordained this time next year
Oh,
in Wakefield Cathedral, and as long as I behave myself, but I do.
Not do that, bro.
My experience of training and everything. So like I got to choose where I trained and how I trained. And I went to Cranmer to visit, but I couldn't access all of the sites. It was a little bit hard for me to get around it. Either I use a walker or I use a wheelchair, and it was just a bit difficult. And St Hild in Mayfield, the site's not the most accessible place, but I can get around it. There's lifts there's other places, and I can do it under my own steam. I don't have to rely on people. However, there's always people that help if I ask. The training's a lot different because we come together every every other month, every like 5 or 6 weeks, and we do our residential there. But we're living in the communities that we've been living in. We're working with the people that we've been called to serve. There's people who are still remaining in jobs and doing like the part-time and then placements. I'm doing a full-time contextual, and I'm working in quite a different parish actually. There's people there who are millionaires, and there's people there who are using food banks. It's really diverse, and it's a rural community, but some rural communities absolutely are, like that. Um, so I'm having a fantastic time, but I did go to Switzerland last year. The ministry team paid for me to go so I could go and visit the World Council of Churches, and there were students from all over UK there, from Cuddesdon, from Cranmer Hall, there was another one down south. I forgot the name of it. And when I was asking them about their training, they were saying about this playing the game, and we're having to do this, and they were like, and I was sitting there and I'm thinking, and a lot of them were working class as well, and I was sitting there thinking, I'm so glad I went with St Hill College, and they're not paying me to say that or nothing, It's just it's not like that. You know, in my first year, I'm gonna name drop her now because she's wonderful. Her name's Janet Williams. She's the vice principal, and she said, "Has anyone heard this term playing the game throughout like the sermons and doing this?" And I thought, "Oh, here we go. You know, like this is going to be the chat where you need to pull your socks up. You need to do that." She just went, "There's no game,"
Praise
and I
God.
was like, "Oh." She went, "There's no game. This is life. This is what we've been called to do.
Mm.
If you are here now, you have been absolutely called, and it is right. Do not feel like you don't belong." And literally, and then she handed over to one of the monks who took like a spirituality session and walked out.
Mm.
I didn't hear anything after that. I was just sat there in awe, like, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
And how much we all needed to hear that as well.
fabulous.
Mm.
Lee, I think that's probably a good way to end. Susie, would you like to just finish? Would you perhaps offer a prayer for people? Would that be all right?
Can do that. Yeah, let's just pray. God, we do thank you for your presence with us, wherever we are, whatever culture, whatever experience that each of us have had and are having. And I just ask that you would pour out your blessing, that as we have had this conversation and are thinking about the future of the church and all that lies ahead, we just ask that you, as we know you are, just go before us, that actually it be your will that is done, as is always our prayer, and that God, that you just pour out a huge blessing as we go from this place right now. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Susie, and thank you all very much for coming on. It's been a fascinating chat. I hope you've enjoyed being part of it. And
Alex, can we do it again? I think we need. I don't mean do it again. I've loved this, but I think this is the key. I think we need to meet together more often and share, not in bitterness, because God's been in it all. But I think, we're waiting for the people to talk, but maybe we can or are called to be part of the solution. So I'm not on about Zoom, but I would love to be able to have further conversation with all you, because it's the first time I've been together with so many people who actually go, oh yeah, I get that.
Yeah,
it's been a joy. So
well,
thank you.
Yeah, well, we'll follow this up then. We'll follow this up later in the year, and keep your eye on General Synod. Keep your eye on the church. Thanks for watching. You've been watching the Godcast, and go check it out.
Keep
It's on
my
all
prayers,
platforms.
Lee.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks very much. Nice to meet everyone. Cheers. Bye.